Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man Ant Walker here with another edition of Unleashed, the weekly panel discussion show. Of course, this week we've decided to run with a three-man group right here. So we're going to scale it down because there's a lot less fights to talk about. So scaled down schedule, scaled down panel for the week. But the news has not stopped flowing in. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and introduce the panel. Of course, as always, the senior editor of Sherdog.com, the jack of all trades, who's mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, how are you feeling?
I have got such a hangover right now that like my hair hurts.
What was the drink of choice?
Yes. Vodka. Just I'm about 15 years too old to try to alleviate just boredom by drinking. There got to be more than an occasion than shit all else to do for me to really get hammered. I just need to learn that lesson.
Yeah, I kind of learned my lesson a little bit this weekend. I didn't get hungover, but I kind of had that crappy, like I've been drinking feeling for a little bit. Like, I'll scale back, which is why I don't have a drink right now. Probably get one when the show's over, though. But let's move on. We've got the associate editor of Sherdog.com. He is the man with the math, the stat expert, Jay Petrie. Jay, how you feeling, brother?
You know, I haven't been drinking because I've been trying not to have that fallback option of, oh boy, it's Tuesday, I guess I'll rock and roll. But it's probably not far off. My Corona beard's coming in nicely. Just the usual. We're keeping it real. But we do have a good stat of the week, a stat of the week I'm very happy about, and I'm actually really excited about. 15. This week, it'll have been 15 years since Ultimate Fighter Season 1 finale. 15 years. Do you guys remember a subsection of the fan base that were called tough noobs, that they were the new people that were introduced to the sport and they were following it back. Oh, you just got into it because of tough. They've been watching this sport for 15 years now, so respect.
Yeah, so the students have become the teachers now. It's a marvelous day. Well, let's just go ahead and talk about this huge elephant that's in the room right now. That elephant, we don't know where it's located, but we do know it comes in the form of UFC 249. So now we have official word. The UFC social media accounts have been blasting it throughout the day. We've seen all the chatter online about this, and we saw a lot of speculation leading up to it. I know we talked about one of these possibilities last week, and that is Justin Gaethje stepping in to fill in what was Khabib Nurmagomedov's spot against Tony Ferguson as the main event of UFC 249. Now, however, this will be contested for the interim title. Location to be determined. So, I mean, when we originally were trying to piece together what the outline of the show was, Jay, as always, a fantastic job doing that. It was framed as UFC 249 getting canceled and who was to blame, in which case I was going to just run roughshod over COVID-19 and blame COVID-19 for all of this because damn you, you dirty virus for ruining our regular lives. However, now that it's going on, I'm going to ask the same question. Who should shoulder the blame here for UFC 249 still going on? Jay, you look like you are itching to jump at this one, so you go right ahead and take it first, my man.
Okay. So the UFC tradition's out the window now. We can get past that. Traditionally, the UFC finds a host city and a venue, and they put an event there and they build the card there. Why? Because they can build it up with local talent, with people in the area. Oh, we're in Sacramento, then we can probably put Uriah Faber on. Oh, Team Alpha Male, that kind of thing. So the fact that we have a very interesting matchup taking place at 249 on 2 weeks' notice is a question mark area. Somewhere on planet Earth is all we have to work with now. It's very strange to me. Now, I'll eat crow, a little bit of crow, like the beak, just the beak, because I said last week there's no way that Gaethje's going to take a fight. Because Gaethje last year turned down a fight with Tony Ferguson. Why? Short notice. He said, I don't want to have to worry about planning for this guy on 4 weeks' notice. That's not enough time. And now 2020 hits, and Justin Gaethje's taking a fight on, I think, 3 weeks' notice because he accepted it a week ago. What? What happened other than money, other than Flash and Stacks? Duffy, what happened?
Well, I mean, it makes me think of Houston hip hop artist Slim Thug, who, after becoming a massive success selling mixtapes out of the trunk of his car, finally signed with a major label. And he explained right away in the first track off his first major label album, he said they put something in his pocket to make him chill. I'm going to say that Justin Gaethje got something in his pocket that made him chill.
$40,000 Reebok money. Well, no, that's actually accurate though, because
it's a title.
He's a title fight,
right? And also notable, Slim Thug has COVID-19. Scarface as well. So Houston hip hop getting hit hard.
See, like Scarface, I heard about. Now Slim, I can kind of see, but that's going to be it for Houston hip hop because the rest of them have been drinking lean for 15 years, and not one of them has coughed since 2011.
Man, Devin the dude is immune at this point.
Oh, okay.
Sure. So I'm sure he is just fine right now with his doobie ass straight. Okay, so now, all right, now I don't want to spill beans that are unverified, but I have gotten word from a little birdie here that ESPN is going to rain hellfire down upon the UFC should they not be able to meet their broadcast contract. So, I think we'll go back to what our colleague Pat O'J, who we've had on the show before, what he wrote about ForSureDog.com. The possibility that this is more an Endeavor move. This is a push by Endeavor to keep cash flow into the company. But alternatively, if this is going to damage broadcast relationships that are profitable, do you think that puts more incentive on Endeavor to keep this going, and Dana is just simply the mouthpiece of this operation here?
I think it's definitely a synergistic thing. I talked about this last week when we were, again, talking about whether this card was going to happen or not. Dana is a stubborn guy. He does not like being told what he can and cannot do. So it is completely in keeping with his personality and his track record to kind of dig his heels in and say, we're going to make this card happen come hell or high water. But at the same time, it's entirely possible that the push is also coming from their parent company. The UFC is a primary source of cash flow and of debt for them. So it is the one cog that at almost all costs can't really stop turning.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up there because we know that Endeavor's, their main source of income. What is it? The percentage of the company versus everything else is tremendous. A $4 billion UFC and the company's valued at $5 or $6 or whatever $billion. So obviously the UFC takes up a lion's share. If the ESPN is pulling the strings, that's very interesting because ESPN, don't they have a deal with Top Rank?
Yes, they do.
And Top Rank went, we're done for a while. We're timing out. So I wonder what, other than more money on the table, which is very possible, what would force the UFC to put on content where other broadcasting arrangements, for instance, ESPN has a very, very lucrative part deal with the NBA. They have a huge, obviously NBA is split among many channels, TNT, et cetera, but ESPN has, they have a good section of that. Well, NBA's, I've been hearing reports that NBA season that's the end of it. We may be done with NBA. So maybe it's possible that ESPN is big enough to push UFC around, but can't say, hey, NBA, you get on the court. Hey, idiots, whatever, let's do this thing. Whereas they can say, hey, guys, let's make this happen. Because Dana, it was very telling. When Dana said on his, I think it was with Instagram Live, we're going to have events after this one. We're going to go on. We're going to have one the next week. We're going to have the one the week after, the week after. So, yeah, they're full steam ahead for some weird reason.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned Top Rank. I mean, Bob Arum, who obviously no love lost between him and Dana White. I mean, he now I think it's also very troubling when Bob Arum is on the right moral side and you are not. That says a lot about the state of affairs that we're in right now. But Arum definitely didn't waste any time to take shots at Dana White. You know, questioning his intelligence for pushing through at a time like this. But I mean, and perhaps the possibility that Top Rank, who, as far as I know, owned by Bob Arum and people loyal to him, so perhaps he doesn't have the same level of overlords looking at him, telling him this must go on. Perhaps even Top Rank can afford to take whatever financial hit that ESPN may be levying upon them in regards to event cancellations. Just a speculation.
I mean, if ESPN has the ability to say, look, we know that the world is shutting down, that entire countries are closing down, that Belarus said, hey, come on over, and the government's like, whoa, no, 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 no. That kind of thing is happening, that ESPN would have the ability, the clout to be able to say, hey, you know, you can do that fight thing. Go right ahead. And also, by the way, 249 is a pay-per-view still. So they are clearly saying we need the money right now. But that pay-per-view actually was a pretty telling thing. Hey, man, we're going. Because everyone's going to say, yes, unemployment is, I'm hearing numbers of 13, 15%, and wages are going down, and everything like that. We can throw $70 at a fight card. Let's rock and roll, boys.
Yeah, and it's not like we can at least you would be being socially responsible by inviting your buddies over to watch and split the cost.
Watch party.
So this is genuinely all in one person's pocket.
And all those Hooters and B-dubs that would be paying $1,100 or $1,600,
right,
gone, shut down.
Because I worked at a restaurant and they had a certain amount. You had to pay max capacity for the area to do that kind of thing. It's a discount. So yeah. The B-dubs, the Buffalo Wild Wings had a lucrative arrangement with the UFC for a long time. That's not going to exist. Oh my God, these pay-per-view numbers. I'm glad we don't get them anymore because Meltzer would have a field day.
I used to bartend at a sports bar in the DC area that had one of these arrangements to where they're showing all the pay-per-views and you know, I remember my manager at the time breaking it down for me exactly how much it cost per event. And even for boxing events, it was a matter of how many. It was some sort of formula that took into effect the amount of seats in the building, the capacity, and then the square footage and the amount of TVs. I remember having this conversation with him because there was it was a boxing pay-per-view. I think it was Shane Mosley and Sergio Mora, if I'm remembering this correctly. And he's asking me, should I order this pay-per-view? I was like, I want to see this fight, but I think I'm the only person that even knows what's going on. So maybe don't. But he ordered it anyway. He lost a ton of money. But anyway, so now we're taking out so many different factors that lead to the pay-per-view revenue. But in an era where ESPN is paying you guaranteed for an event, does it matter to the UFC? I say it doesn't.
I think that their messages, and maybe Duffy can help me with this, their messages we got to put on the content. We got to put on the show. ESPN just wants it, and they'll package it and go.
And I mean, there's always, as you peel each layer away, there's another moving part because, ESPN, I'm sure, has advertisers going, we've bought these blocks of time for this quarter, but if you're showing reruns or some bullshit instead of like a UFC card or whatever.
No.
Dodgeball commercials, man, they are lucrative.
So what you're saying is Toyo Tires commercials aren't popular in bowling circuits?
Oh man, what are we gonna do with Francis Ngannou hanging out in the car? What are we gonna do with Brian Ortega drinking a beer?
Those farmers only ads. We need those farmers only ads. But anyway, but I mean we're talking a lot. Now, granted, we could have the entire show strictly about the business side to the pay-per-view, and why things are structured the way they are, and any sort of speculation we're hearing about ESPN or Endeavor's involvement with the decision to push forward. But I mean, we're talking about the broadcast. We're not even talking about the actual event. We don't know where this is going to be. How the hell is this going to happen? We had a little speculation that's circling around Twitter right now. Jeff Sherwood, founder of SureDog.com, currently of Between Rounds Radio, who is heavily tied into that area of the Central Valley in California. He was saying that this was, and I'm not sure if this was in tongue in cheek or if he's alluding to actual sources that he may have, because he is very well connected in within Tachi Palace. But he's saying that Tachi Palace could be the destination for the UFC, and including their next 3 events that they're talking about putting on. So, does this make sense to either one of you guys here?
UFC on Tachi, baby. Let's do it.
That's surreal. Even by the standards of 2020 and what a year it's been so far, that is surreal to hear someone say Ultimate Fighting Championship at the Tachi Palace Hotel and Casino in Lemoore, California. I read the tweet. I feel as though Jeff was being sincere about this, and certainly the forums are picking up on it as though it's real news, or at least a real rumor. I mean, that's nuts. It is tribal land.
Well, I'll step in here and I don't want, what the hell? Tachi Palace is closed. Like, it's not a minor thing that you go on Tachi Palace's website. They closed on March 20th for COVID-19. And it was an indefinite closure. They hope to be short-lived, but we don't know how long. The curve is not flattening in any regard. So I to think that in 12 days Tachi is going to say, we're good. Well, would they open the venue for that? I don't think so, because it's a resort.
But we have to, and you raise a very good point, Jay, but we have to think about this in totality here. Yeah. Was Tachi Palace closed because Tachi decided to close it, or because government in California decided that it needed to be closed? And that's a big distinction, because if the state of California decided to close it down, then there would be no choice. Tachi Palace would have to remain closed. But as you said, Ben, this is on tribal land. Granted, the times that I have worked at Tachi Palace as media, and the one time I called an event there as a play-by-play commentator, there were commission officials that weren't part of the tribe. It was California State and the California Amateur Association that sanctioned the aforementioned events. Now, if that's because Tachi has decided to seek what would be considered outside government counsel in sanctioning any sort of combat sports, if it's voluntary, that means they have the option of doing it however they want, which means they could theoretically open up Tachi for this event, have the UFC serve as its own commission if they didn't appoint a couple of people to function in that role just for a matter of paperwork. So there's a fair amount of speculation says that maybe this is real. I don't know. I don't know, guys. I'm not privy to what the actual tribal regulations are. But if they volunteer to have California State sanction their events out of just for simplicity's sake, that means they don't have to do it.
Here, let me break this for you while we were talking about it. I pulled up a 2017 event from Tattoo Palace from a TPF card, TPF 32. Just one of those random cards, sanctioned by California State Athletic Commission, Executive Director Andy Foster, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, this is, Tachi was, and I know the WEC was, but sanctioned by the CSAC. It isn't the Tachi Palace Tribal Athletic Commission. There are some, like Mohegan Sun, for instance, has its own entity. I thought that Tachi had something like that. Like it might be like a licensing office, like the TDLR, except for one office and there's like one guy. But I feel like that entity exists. California has shut down all sporting events, and that and as a result, CSAC would have to follow that. So CSAC cannot sanction UFC event in California. So it actually has to sanction it, but I don't think I don't know. It doesn't compute.
Even if it goes through, bringing this show to tribal land is just the worst optics I've ever heard of. It's a shame that the UFC doesn't nickname their events anymore, because this would be UFC 249 smallpox blanket.
Oh, I prefer UFC on Tachi, but we'll be okay with that.
Oh wow. All right, I don't even know where to go from that, but I think you're bringing up a fair point, Ben. Like we can go on and on about the irresponsibility of this from a public health standpoint, or from a fighter health or staff health standpoint, but obviously those complaints have fallen on deaf ears, and quite honestly, I don't know if I'm tired of yelling about it. I'm tired of yelling about it, man. I think I might just resign to maybe a little more op-ed writing, maybe some snarky tweets, but my vocal cords can do this no longer. This should not be happening. But let's talk about how it's still happening. Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson as a fight. Are we excited by this, or are we? What's the mood of the panel here?
The matchup is sensational. I mean, I'm a little concerned that it's on such short notice. I don't know, what Justin Gaethje weighs right now, or and how he's going to get to 155, because this is a title fight within the next is it 12 days? Yeah, 12 days. But aside from that, on paper, this is one of the best matchups you could make in the sport right now. Period. Coronavirus or not, it's two top 5 guys in the toughest division in the world that are both absolute savages. Like, yeah, this is the dream fight. It's just gonna be weird, and I hope that the circumstances don't rob us of what this fight could have been, just in terms of the in-cage product.
Yeah, I don't want to poo-poo it, because I don't want to go full negative Nancy here on this show. Love the fight. Just independent, just Gaethje versus Ferguson, sign me the hell up. Okay, in general. However, the context of this matchup is just the worst possible case scenario you could imagine, because not only is it on short notice, but it's on short notice for guys that can't have standard, the normal, well, I'm always in shape, I'm always in training camp, I'm always feeling that good, so I can do that anytime. Well, most of them aren't, because most of them are stuck in their backyards. You're just kind of stuck running up hills, doing whatever they can do to try and stay in shape. They have a garage. If they're Ray Cooper III, they can do that kind of thing. But otherwise, it's a limited just life. Their people are stuck at home. So this won't even, and it can't possibly be the best Tony Ferguson, the best Justin Gaethje. It can't be. Just if it wouldn't possibly be able to reach to that level. So it's two top 5 guys taking a short notice fight against, against a guy they were not prepared to fight at a location they don't know where they're going. It's the right fight. It's the wrong time. And that is terrible, because, I raised this, I think, to our news editor, Tristan Critchfield. We don't know where this event will take place. It could be in Wyoming. Wyoming is high elevation, because Wyoming is kind of friendly to, regulation that doesn't need to be like bare knuckle fighting championship. The first event was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. One of the early UFC cards, UFC 6, Casper, Wyoming. Wyoming is elevation, so that's a whole different ballgame. I just don't like the fight now. What if Gaethje goes in and sparks him? What if Gaethje goes in and uses his wrestling for the first time ever. Work with me here. And takes away the possible Tony Khabib matchup. It just, the upside, there's so little upside and a lot of risk across the board. I just can't. It hurts. My sensible, reasonable person is being a real bummer to my fight fan side.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm similarly in this. I'm feeling close to the same. Actually, I don't know really no other words to put it in. Um, the UFC is taking a huge gamble right now with potentially the greatest lightweight fight on paper ever.
Yeah.
The fight that everybody wants to see. It's very rare that the biggest fights you can make from a fan interest standpoint and a competitive standpoint are the same thing. That is an extraordinarily rare thing. Justin Gaethje is probably the toughest matchup for anybody in the lightweight division outside of Tony Ferguson or Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Oh yeah.
So to have a gentleman like this prepared to completely throw a monkey wrench in your plans just seems a bit foolhardy for multiple reasons. Besides the fact that we're in the middle of a global pandemic and this should not be happening in the first place, you're forcing this to happen when the rest of the world has decided to wisely shut down. You're also, from a competitive standpoint, you're screwing with the possibility of this fight being up to its optimal best, with both men having abbreviated, if not completely irregular variations of training camps, to have fight weeks, or I don't know, or I don't even know what you call it, if they're being shuttled to a location that they nor do their management have any knowledge of what it is, or where they don't know what's going on. So this is not a regular fight. This can't be looked at as a regular fight. This has to taint the action in some way, shape, or form. And then all of this to piecemeal something together, although it's on paper it's a fantastic card, but you're piecemealing things together that don't need to happen right now. And in the process, you have a strong possibility of sacrificing the greatest fight that the 155-pound division has ever seen. So I just don't see why this has to happen, at least this way. If it's all about just ESPN getting an event, if it's all about just something, you could have brought back Gleison Tebow and give us that long-awaited Tony Ferguson Tebow too. You could have given us that. It fulfills the obligation. Boom. People got some fights. They got something to watch. Fine. We could dig up Efrain Escudero somewhere. We could see what's up with re-signing Darren Cruikshank. There are so many different areas they could have gone here, other than giving us a great fight that's tainting an even greater fight in some lessened version.
Like and this is just throwing some numbers out there because we have to do it. There's never been a fight like this where two guys are on 12-fight win streaks in major promotions. Never been done. The longest win streak in UFC history is 16. And that's obviously Anderson Silva, and then Jones, Mighty Mouse, GSP, and Holloway have 13. There's never been a time where two guys on incredible win streaks are going to meet for the ultimate there's just everything about Tony Khabib is the matchup to make. I'm going to throw a question at both of you, and I know it's not feasible, but it's a reasonable thought in my head. What if Gaethje Ferguson was ruled an exhibition, like Tenshin Nasukawa versus Floyd Mayweather, for example?
Then that would just be even dumber. Then just throw the whole thing away. Like, that's just stupid. If we're playing exhibition with pay-per-views, we're playing exhibition with top-ranked contenders that have rightful claims to title shots, all just because something needs to be aired. Just throw it in rice. Throw it in rice, man. Total trash if that's the case. Ben, you want to trash on that too?
Yeah, I can't see any reason to make it an exhibition. It's already problematic that they're making it happen, but an exhibition doesn't erase what actually happened in everyone's mind. And considering that at best, whoever wins this is going to fight Khabib as soon as the world returns to some semblance of normalcy. Unless one of them gets like badly injured or there's some like weird bullshitty result that makes them want to run it back.
Hey, don't you wish that evil on us?
It's just going to be a speed bump.
Tony Ferguson could be a 2-time interim champion.
I think he should get to cash them in for one real belt. Like he can turn the 2 in. Yeah,
it's like a punch card.
I'm good with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, should get like a free donut or something with that too. Perhaps he should get some free tiramisu with that instead. How's that? We'll spice up that dessert.
A side of McNuggets.
Now, I think Adonis approves of this plan. So I'm gonna turn it into a different direction here before we move on to other things. Granted, that amazingly there are a few other things that we can talk about here. But as far as the logistics of this event, one thing that we did discuss last week very briefly, and that was the aftermath of the UFC card in Brazil, where there was no audience, and where afterward, both John McDessie and Ronda Marcos had to self-quarantine, and they were unable to have certain injuries looked at. Now, from a medical standpoint, what's the likelihood that a fight between and I'll just spew off some of the names on this card. When you throw together violence from Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, Jessica Andrade, Rose Namajunas, Greg Hardy, Vicente Luque, Calvin Kattar, Jeremy Stevens, Francis Ngannou, Jarrett Rosenstruck, Uriah Hall, Jacare. I don't need to spew out the rest of the card, but what's the chances that someone gets hurt and needs medical attention when this is all over with?
100%.
Exactly. How much medical staff can be spared from a pandemic for a cage fight that doesn't need to happen in a place that we don't know really exists?
I mean, that says everything right there. The siren. That's
why I didn't mute.
it's just an unreasonable ask. Given, I mean, okay, John McDessie, you're a very nice guy, and you're a good fighter. We've had a lot of fun with you. But your fight against Francisco Trinaldo was not an entertaining matchup. It was not an all-action slugfest. It was a glorified sparring match, and I say that because despite that, he came out of it with some serious enough injuries that needed to be attended to, and that was not the fighters did not connect on each other very often. There was not a lot of damage inflicted in the fight, and despite that, there were injuries that came out of that. Fighters are going to take damage in fights. It just happens. Heavyweights are fighting. I mean, there's the news today that Ngannou is fighting Rosenstrike on this card, that Greg Hardy is fighting Yorkin De Castro on this card. I mean, just remember what Rosenstrike did to Overeem. How is he going to get to a doctor if he knocks, Ngannou's lip up?
Everybody who fights Tony Ferguson looks like they got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
Every single one.
And Justin Gaethje
people
puts
made
guys
memes out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way that these guys are going to be able to get out unscathed medically, and yet here we are. Hooray! We're in a great position to take care of the fighters that Dana claims he's doing this and keeping safety and medical in mind and consulting with doctors and making sure he has all the best knowledge. And okay, anyway, yeah, I don't.
And,
you know my thoughts on it.
And we've heard precisely jack shit about COVID-19 tests for any staff, any potential regulators, and the fighters, coaches, et cetera. So I'm kind of at a loss of words of why we're even having this conversation right now. But of course, California, as we stated earlier in our Tachi Palace discussion, has shut down all combat sports events until June officially. And this is actually right when the Association of Boxing Commissions has made the recommendation that there should be no combat sport events at all until this is over with. That news just broke a matter of minutes ago, right before we started recording today. Now with California being California state, shutting down all combat sports events. Of course, tribal lands may be an exception. I mean, should other states be following suit? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Should this be a nationwide thing?
Probably.
I'm sorry, I'm not distracted or anything. I'm looking up to see the ABC to read that to us, and I encountered the entirety of the UFC 249 card as it stands, as the UFC just posted it minutes ago, and it's a 12 fight card with a lot of nonsense on it, and noticeably there's no location given, no anything like that given. Uh, California is not the first state to shut events down, sporting events or gatherings of any kind. You can list a lot of states that have done this: Connecticut and Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania. That they'll limit gatherings of X amount of people as it pertains to sporting events. Well, obviously you can't have a baseball game if you can only have 10 people in the room, so on and so forth. In California, 22 events were postponed: boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, grappling, MMA. So this is a wide sweeping thing, and yet we're just going to push past it because the show must go on. Like, states are saying cut your losses. Countries are saying, hey, we'll be back. We'll do this in a little bit. The Masters, one of the most expensive golf tournaments out there, is taking place in November because of this. Hello, what am I missing here?
If I'm not mistaken, I think the U.S. Open also decided to postpone.
Yep. Yeah,
like
it's in
like
September.
The one sport where you truly don't have to interact with anyone in any sort of contamination way. Like the competitors are no more than 8 feet close to each other. That's like the closest they get is 8 feet. The official is on like a ladder that sits above them like 10 feet. And the court, the court is just wide as all hell, and there's just all this space. It's all this empty space, and everybody's quiet, so you wouldn't even notice a crowd being there. They're shutting down, but the sport where you bleed, you sweat, and you spit on people, so it's all free game. It's all free game.
Hey man, as long as they touch elbows ahead of time,
yeah,
good.
touch elbow, and then you grapple. So
and then you grapple.
It's all good. All right, so now we're looking at the UFC moving UFC 250 from Brazil to the U.S. We've gotten word that Jose Aldo was among. I forget who else was
Shogun,
on there. Brazil,
too.
yeah, Shogun, yeah. Brazilian fighters who were asked to make their way to the United States while they try to figure out a venue for this to happen. Now, do you think this card is in jeopardy as well as this is moving to the U.S., or are we going to have this same conversation leading up to the May 9th date about why this shouldn't be happening and some sort of yacht in international waters?
Well, I'm very comfortable predicting that it will not take place on that date in Brazil. Whether it will happen in the United States, I'm going to have to wait and see what happens with 249. If it is a success, I mean, in terms of not being a total and immediate disaster, then I expect they will, follow suit with as many cards as they can over the spring and summer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that first one, the first show that they're going to try and run with this thing that you can see the lovely display image sitting here on your screen. It's the first one's going to tell everything, because if they can pull it off, I'm using air quotes here, if they can pull this off and put on the show that they're claiming that they're going to actually do in the location they're going to do it at, they're going to do that. They're going to repeat their not success, but they're going to repeat the experiment again and again and again. I mean, UFC Brasilia was a fluke of an event. It slipped in before Brazil said no, none of this. We're done here. We're moving on here. It was a couple days earlier. But I just still, coaches are coming out, head coaches of teams are saying, guys, what are we doing here? There's no way we can have a full, legitimate, good training camp. I love I've covered the LFA since the very beginning, but there is a quality difference. And one of the reasons why is because there's a lot of short notice fights, catch weights fights, reorganized cards that are just put together because that's the way we're going to do it. Damn it, we're going to have a card. I respect it, but that's how it is going to look like for these UFC events because they're hurrying, rushing fighters up a month before the card up from other countries. Say, hey, come here. We got to get this set. Get here as fast as you can. Like 249 has a lot of international fighters on the card, et cetera, down the line. They have a lot of international fighters that will not be able to get into the country. So it's going to be the Contender Series for real. Like there's no Contender Series to get there. It's just going to put the Contender Series fighters they were looking to put in the UFC and say, here you go. Here's your audition. And, whatever happens, I guess. I don't feel good about it, though.
So what you're saying is this is my chance to finally fight CM Punk?
Bring it on, man. Let's do this thing.
But I ain't catching that COVID. I'm staying with my family. So anyway, now we're gonna move on from this. We'll breeze through a couple other topics before we wrap things up. So anyway, John Jones, who we talked about last week, he sentenced to 4 days house arrest and a year probation, a small fine, and a sort of ignition interlock, I guess a breathalyzer lock for his car. Will the UFC just pretend like this never happened and move on? Gentlemen, what do we do here now?
They will sweep it under the rug to the extent possible. I mean, we've just spent a solid 45 minutes talking about how reckless and inadvisable and potentially harmful the UFC's plans going forward are. It would almost be hypocritical if they did make a big deal out of one incident of drunk driving and shooting a firearm into the air. Like, I'm not excusing or condoning those things, but in terms of threatening other lives and just being generally reckless and irresponsible, there is a difference of degree. Like, what can they do other than give him a slap on the wrist at this point?
So what's so I got to ask you, what's the difference between DWI and PWI? Driving while under the influence or promoting while under the influence? Which one is more harmful to society? So anyway, I'm kind of with you on this one, Ben. I think this just disappears, and pretty soon this will just be another footnote in the long story of John Jones. Jay, anything you want to add to that?
Just how did this become such a non-story? Days later, like this happened, last week? And we're already, it's a footnote, and I don't mean that to disparage our show in any regard, that generally speaking, the MMA community has forgotten that John Jones was allegedly driving around intoxicated while allegedly firing up Glock 44 in the air. What?
2 weeks ago, Ashley Evans Smith stole medical supplies from off of somebody's step. And that
feels like that was last year.
It feels like 300 fucking years ago.
It feels so long ago.
That was like right around UFC 3 that happened.
It's such a B story. Like, I said the week that we covered this story, it almost seems like, well, the UFC has no choice but to slap him, to take the title away from him. Well, at this point, Duffy's argument is winning me over. At this point, if the UFC punishes Jones but puts on an event with a pandemic going on, they're betraying themselves, and they have to move on. And we will forget that this actually happened. Well, he had his day in court. They punished him. He had community service and probation and a fine and a breathalyzer in the car. They did what they needed to do, so we're good here. What?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still stuck on the 4 days of house arrest while the state is under a quarantine order. You're supposed to stay at home, but the sentence is to stay at home.
To be served concurrently.
Yeah.
Was
and
it?
then immediately after the 4 days was over, he was on Twitter posting
Yes.
videos of him like riding a scooter or something through the desert with what looked like a shoulder holster. So I don't
No,
I
no,
don't know.
he was shooting firearms off. But did you see the thing? And this, people were calling for his head for this, and I understand that there was a video he posted called the Toilet Paper Challenge, where he had a
With the
bow, and arrow, and he shot an arrow into a target that had a roll of toilet paper on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of dirty assholes out in the country that would love his target practice. So wow. It's this sport. All right, so let's move on to a segment dedicated to the weird, to the strange, to the underserved topics. Also happens to be the best named segment in all of media history, and that is I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. So what surprised you gentlemen the most about any news from the past week? Normally, this is centered around pre-fight coverage, post-fight coverage of the fights themselves. Not a whole lot on that end necessarily, but I mean, combat sports is weird. Share it with me, Jay. What's your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment this week?
Let's get a little mundane, but still strange. So, John Fitch, we haven't heard from John Fitch since he fought to a draw with Rory McDonald in Bellator, and because the tournament had to have somebody move on, the champion retained his title in Rory McDonald, and Fitch was eliminated from the $1 million tournament. So he's been out of competition for a year now. He's 42 years young, and he said he's probably getting ready to retire. He talked to MMA Junkie, I believe, and he had concerns about the sport, saying that he said, quote, it's pro wrestling without the predetermined outcome. That it's all entertainment and a sham, and there's no point anymore, and there's no rhyme or reason to titles and title eliminators and number one contenders. And the reason why this is surprising to me, he has written, I don't know, 8 autobiographies by now, give or take, talking about how much he loves or hates the sport. He's been a UFC fighter. He's been a World Series fighting fighter. He's now a Bellator fighter. Is he just now learning this? Is this a new development with him? Did something happen in Bellator that made him sour? That his time at the UFC and his incredibly painfully long win streak finally gave him a title shot, and then he never got anything ever again. I don't know. It's a very strange thing for him to say, oh, the sport's just gotten me down. Like, dude, you've been doing this for 15 years. You know exactly what you signed up for. And speaking of what he signed up for, there's something he said that bothered me for 2 different reasons. He said he wasn't going to take a fight unless either it was for a title, or if Bellator paid him more than his contract says he's going to get paid for. Like, if they pay me more than what I'm agreed to, then I'll take a fight with anybody. Otherwise, I want a title fight. How can you complain about the state of the industry that you're a part of while also saying, I signed this contract with this company, and it's a great contract, and I love with the company, but I'm not going to fight for them unless they pay me more money than I signed for them to fight for. So I want fighter pay to go up. Don't ever get that twisted. Fighter pay needs to be increased across the board, but it feels strange to claim your sport's broken while also saying I'm not going to fight unless they pay me more money than I said that I'd fight for. So, John Fitch, I'm kind of surprised, Mr. Falcons.
All right, Ben. What's your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment this week?
I mean, mine's a little bit obscure, but a fighter from Kazakhstan named Georgi Kichagin. He is 29 years old. He is usually a middleweight, but he's 23-6. But he's actually better than that record sounds. He's like 16-1 in his last 17. He's only lost one fight in the last 5 years. He was on the cusp of signing with the UFC in the last few weeks. Flipped, put on the other hat on the podium, and signed with ACA, Absolute Championship Akhmat. So he'll be fighting his next 4 or 6 fights or whatever over in Russia and Eastern Europe. I I find it actually a little heartening, and it kind of goes to Jay talking about fighter pay. I mean, in spite of having slammed on them for the first hour of this show, I don't want the UFC to fail or do poorly. I mean, as a fight fan, it is best for me if the best fighters can fight each other. The way the best fighters can fight each other is if they're all in the same organization. You know, I like that I can see the best football and basketball players play each other on a regular basis. I want that for fighting. But as long as we are in the kind of environment we are, where there is, you know, definitely a dominant promotion, but they're by no means the only promotion, I do like it when the competition kind of keeps the UFC honest, where they occasionally lose a fighter they wanted because of pay or other concessions, you know, because that does, you know, force them to compensate fighters a little better than they otherwise would. And until we get fighters actually organizing, you know, that's what we've got. What we've got is the gentle hand of the free market, hopefully pushing up fighter pay a little bit at a time.
All right. Well, Mamed Khalidov and KSW famously, and Michelle Materla, actually. Materla, that was a very interesting example where he signed with the UFC. He basically signed with him. It was publicly, he's a UFC fighter now, and went back because KSW said, hey, we're going to give you more money. Stay in Poland. So, yeah, that's good.
All right, so let's move on now to my I'm Not Surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week. And somehow another, that damn Dave Feldman, he keeps on at it. He keeps finding a way to sneak into the show. At this point, I think he's simply making announcements, and BKFC is making moves just to be able to watch this show and see themselves get talked about. David Feldman has now garnered the services of one Shannon the Cannon Briggs. He will be making his BKFC debut sometime after the apocalypse. I just don't even know what to say at this point. Shannon Briggs has been inactive in the sport of boxing since, I believe, May of 2016. He did compete in K1. He has a knockout win there before hanging up his kickboxing career after that sole outing. So he's not a guy who's inexperienced as far as other realms of fighting go outside of the boxing world. But BKFC has dug up another name of yesteryear from the retirement home. So let's see what Briggs can do. I mean, I guess in addition to, you probably can make a case that he is the most accomplished boxer to make his way over to BKFC, depending on where you rank his career alongside Paulie Maldonado. But anyway, that's our BKFC news for the week.
Hey, hold on. How old is he? He's getting close to 50, isn't he? I thought he's almost there. He's not a spring chicken by any regard.
48 years
Jeez.
old. Yeah. So yeah, he's an older guy for sure to be involved in combat sports, and you know that was kind of the story about him toward the end of his boxing career, his age. So whatever. Whatever. All right. So we're gonna wrap things up with the speed bag this week, and this is where I get to flex my authority on you guys. Of course, with just 3 guys on the panel, let's mix things up. I'm going to jump back into the regular fray of 10 seconds per question per answer. So go ahead and set this clock right, and here we go. So Jay, I'll start with you. One championship CEO, Chachu Sityodtong, wants one champions to fight against their UFC counterparts. Are there any one fighters that you give a chance against their colleagues in the UFC? You have 10 seconds.
I mean, Demetrius Johnson isn't even the champion yet, and I think he's the only guy that could.
Oh, I thought that was a punchline there. All right, that was a straightforward answer. No. All right, yeah. All right, Ben. Anybody on one's roster do you think will make a good showing against themselves in the UFC?
Bibiano Fernandez 5 years ago. I'd like to see Angela Lee take on some UFC strawweights or flyweights. That's about it.
What about Sage Northcutt?
We've seen that.
All right, I'll just go ahead and I wouldn't mind seeing England Song and Israel Adesanya. That could be fun. Although I definitely would favor Adesanya in that. Bibiana Fernandez would have been fun. I'll still go for that. I'll still take it. Okay, now next question, gentlemen. I'll start with you, Ben. Did you watch WrestleMania this weekend? You have 10 seconds.
I did not even a bit of it.
Oh, too busy drinking, I say. Jay, did you watch any of WrestleMania this weekend?
Yeah, I did. I watched the second half. I didn't know it was split in half. It wasn't for me, and that's too bad. I was hoping it'd fill the void, but it didn't.
Did I watch any of WrestleMania this weekend? Nope. I opted to play Red Dead Redemption 2 instead. I did follow along some of it on the timeline between Jason Burgos and Andreas Hale. I was covered. All right. All right. So now the next question, I will start with you on this one, Jay. What do you make about the news of Dana White's sex tape lawsuit? You have 10 seconds.
No comment, Your Honor. It's juicy, it's salacious, but it doesn't have any legs to it. I mean, this guy already went to jail for extortion.
Well, perhaps it has a third leg. Ben, what do you make of Dana White's sex tape lawsuit? All right, you got 10 seconds, Ben. What do you make of Dana White's sex tape lawsuit?
Well, I guess now we know why he wasn't at that Brazil card last month. He's not allowed.
No, he's been under a little bit of restriction there. All right,
I bet he and his wife got like the same Facebook account.
If their profile picture is a picture of them, you know he got in trouble.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Will it split their names? Be like Dana and I don't know her name.
Dana and Mrs.
White, yeah, that's what I mean.
Like where they
well, yeah, sometimes married couples will have Dana and Jen.
That's the sure sign you got in trouble. That's the sign right there. All right, so what I'll just go ahead and start the clock. The only question I have about Dana White's sex tape is, did Colby Covington record it? That's all I want to know. But anyway, I'll just let the bell ring. There we go. And that right there will conclude another edition of Unleashed. So, gentlemen, thanks once again for joining me. And Jay, thank you for once again outlining a fantastic show. Ben, thank you in advance for the post-production work that will seem so seamless on the broadcast here. And due to that post-production work, you can look down and see where to follow us on Twitter. You can find all three of our work at SureDog.com. You can find some more work from me coming up at MMA On Point as well. And of course, you can tune into the Walkout Network. Definitely long overdue, but due to some technical issues, whatever, it's almost done. Me and Matt Hunter's hip hop show will be debuting sometime soon. So not sure if that's going to be Walkout Network thing or it's going to be on his Trending Now network, but it's going to be some copyright issues with audio. So we might just have to make it audio only. Another story, but that should be hitting you guys really soon as well. But anyway, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. And in the meantime, you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. You got to stay socially distanced. And through it all, you got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.